Hey everyone, welcome back to JLXP, another 10 Thoughts edition, this time going into week 7 of the LCS Summer Split regular season. Second to last week of the regular season, so 5 games left for all the teams, and also the first we will see of patch 12.14, which they've said is the biggest patch we are going to see until after Worlds. So the scope of the systems level changes they've made is very large, and this is going to be the first time we get to see LCS teams trying to react to that stuff. So before I get into the 10 teams, there's actually like a little bit more of a preamble than usual on these 10 Thoughts episodes. First off, thank you everyone for watching and talking about it. Reading the YouTube comments, reading the Reddit comments has been really great. Going to continue to be consistent with this at least 2 uploads a week schedule, Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific time and Mondays at 6 a.m. Pacific time, with the Mondays being the recap episodes. So thank you for that. But in terms of the content of this episode, the patch is one thing that I'll get into a little bit. The change I'm most interested in is actually the change to Drakes. So on one hand, all of the Drakes, I have them up on the side here, their buffs have been made more powerful. So not by a huge amount, like the Hextech Dragon buff, instead of giving 6% attack speed and 6 ability haste, it gives 9% attack speed and 9 ability haste. Or the Infernal Drake, instead of 4% attack damage and ability power, it's giving 6% more bonus attack damage and ability power. So they're getting about 50% more rewarding, which seems like a lot, but is a fairly minuscule thing when you're talking about single dragons. It's still going to make people much more aware of dragons, though, because they're trying to create more conflict around the objective. The other thing that I think is actually going to have a bigger impact on pro play is the health change to the Drakes. So pre-patch, they had 2,650 plus 240 per level. Now they have 3,450 plus 380 per level. So slightly more than a 50% increase in health, which is going to make it significantly harder to kill from a time perspective. And I'll get into the reasons why this is important for certain individual teams, but especially early on in the game when you're trying to sneak a dragon, or not necessarily sneak it, but take it because you have tempo on the map. You've just pushed the other team back to base, or you're just coming out of base and you had a really good recall timer and you can swoop up the dragon before going back to lane as you help your jungler. That timing is much harder to hit now. So we're either going to see more people getting pushed off Drakes, or just an actual delay of when the first dragon is actually taken because you can no longer get it on these timings, which might, weirdly enough, make the games longer. So that would be my hot take of, actually making the Drakes more powerful, but also way tankier, has a chance of extending games, even if part of the reasons for this patch was to just create more. The previous patch was the durability patch, like more fragility in the game. They've reduced sustain, they've changed a ton of runes, they've reduced a bunch of healing, and they've also buffed Drakes and Rift Herald to make people fight over them more. But that's just an interesting thing in the patch that I wanted to mention here in the podcast, because I couldn't really go into detail in a tighter 10 Thoughts article. The other thing that I did, and this was like, I'm not the first one to think of like red, yellow, green for strength of something, but I was watching a golf tournament and they were ranking the difficulty of the holes with red holes, which are the hardest holes, yellow holes, which are kind of average holes, and green holes, which are easy holes. And like in golf, you could say a par 4, which means if you're going to play it to par, it takes 4 strokes. Some par 4s are super hard. You score a 4 that's going to feel good. Some par 4s are super easy. You score a 4 that's going to feel bad. And I think professional golfers, to a certain level, intuit that, but it will still always feel bad if you get a bogey and always feel good if you get a birdie, much like it always feels good in League to get a win and feels bad to have a loss. But we're really seeing some stratification in the standings where a win against a red team, like e.g. 100 Thieves, C9, or TL, is much harder to accomplish than a win against a green team, which I put as Golden Guardians, Immortals, TSM, and Dig. And then I made the yellow teams, which are in the middle, and there's far fewer of them, CLG and FlyQuest. There's a whole debate about whether or not TL and CLG, since they have the same win-loss record, should be in the same color tier. But sorry, this is my podcast. It's based on the perception of the teams as well as previous results. So I had to make the line somewhere. I have the top 4 teams as the red teams. I have CLG and Fly as the yellow teams, and I have the bottom 4 teams as the green teams. And it's just a different representation of understanding what these teams have left and how hard or easy their games are going to be. So that's in the article, the red and green for each team, and I'll also mention it here in the podcast. So without further ado, let's get into the first team on 10 Thoughts. As usual, Evil Geniuses. They play TSM Saturday and Team Liquid Sunday, which will be some really quality matches. And in the last 5 games, they have 2 red teams and 3 green teams remaining. And I just wanted to talk. There's so many positive things to say about EG, as they are the first place team and the defending champions. And Inspired, I think, is the runaway favorite for MVP. He already has 2 Player of the Week awards, which don't have a direct correlation to MVP, but gives you a pretty good idea of who has been excelling. Last week, he almost got it again, but Berserker went deathless with a pentakill in a 2-0 after C9 beat 2 very difficult opponents. So Berserker kind of took it from him last week, but that would have been a third for Inspired had Berserker not popped off the way he did. And something just to add to what Inspired has done is junglers are so connected with the rest of their team. So some of the stats for Inspired are super cracked. 58 kills as a jungler. The next closest jungler is Contracts, who is 25 kills behind him. You don't do that, though, if your team is not making space for you that allows you to get to these places where you're getting what look like uncontested kills. And Jojo was the one I wanted to zero in on because his stats are actually not crazy. But listening to him in the interviews and also comparing that with the way he plays, he is just creating more pressure than he has at any other point in his career. So he plays very aggressively in what are essentially 1v2 situations, knowing that he's going to get away with it. And almost every other mid who we've talked to about mid laners in the league has said, yeah, actually Jojo's probably the best mid right now, or Jojo is the mid that is the most difficult to play against. This is part of the reason why, but it also pulls the other jungler towards mid lane, which then gives Inspired just even more freedom to do what he wants, and I think adds to Inspired's dominance. I also don't even think it's a hot take, but Inspired, I think, is better now than he was last year when he won MVP of the LEC. So that signing more and more is looking like the biggest and best offseason signing of 2022 for EG. If they, they're on track to repeat. And getting the LEC MVP was like weirdly not super celebrated when EG got it, but now it's definitely looking like it should have been. All right, next team, 100 Thieves. They play Golden Guardians on Saturday and C9 on Sunday. They play 2 red, 2 yellow, and 1 green team. And weirdly enough, with 100 Thieves, I feel like I've finally reached a point where I have a clear understanding of what this team is all about. I've bounced around from saying, oh, are they going to be able to turn it on? They look shaky. Is Abadaga going to be able to lane again? Versus, oh yeah, they're totally fine. They're just going to be able to figure out how to play winning League of Legends again. Where they have, I think, figured it out as a team. I've also figured out that they consistently start trying more when they need to. And that time is now, towards the end of the regular season. They are 1 game out of first. Top 2 is very important because it puts them in a playoff position where they will only have to win 1 best of 5 to make it to Worlds with the way the double elimination bracket works. So they've just been playing consistent, clean League of Legends and winning late game team fights. Because of the changes to the game, they can't win the same way they did in 2021, where they would stack waves and dive on turrets. Turrets are just more powerful now. So they play very conservatively in the early game, and they are getting very good at it. They had an easy schedule last week, Dig and IMT. They beat both of them. Neither of the wins are particularly impressive, but they didn't need to be. 100 Thieves is doing exactly what they need to do to put themselves in position to go to Worlds and trying to ramp up at the right time. So I respect it, and we'll have to continue to track them and see if they just continue to improve on the thing that they've gotten good at. Like whenever that team is at their best, it's because they do one thing consistently well. And right now, that is actually playing fairly low risk League of Legends with good laning and strong team fighting. And that could get into Worlds. We'll see. Next team, C9. They play COG Saturday and 100 Thieves Sunday. And let me tell you, last week was a good week for C9. They had games against Fly and TL. They won both of them, so the stock of C9 is through the roof. And I made one analytical point about this team, and this makes it even more interesting with the patch. They are, by far, the best team in the league at getting first Drake. I'm going to read some stats for you. So last 6 games, they've killed the first dragon in all of them. TL at 954, which was by far the slowest first dragon of their last 6 games. In the 5 before that, 538, 636, 636, 606, and 615. So 5 of those 6 games, they were killing it within a minute and 36 seconds of its spawning. And part of that is because Berserker and Sven have been very efficient in lane. But the second part of that is they're just putting a high team priority on being able to get that first Drake. And we're really going to see if that's still possible. It takes longer to kill the Drake now. There's more awareness from both teams about where the Drake is. I'm sure if any of you have played solo queue after reading the patch notes, you're like, hey, Dragon's more important. Maybe I should go get that thing. Everybody thinks that. So you just die when you start Dragon. That's what happens. I'm really curious to see how this affects C9 and if they make any adaptations to their early game. But they do it really well by just getting the correct situation in bot lane and going to Dragon. But that now requires more time to do, so I'm interested to see it. Next team, 4th place, Team Liquid. They play FlyQuest and EG. Tough opponents. And they have a smack dab middle schedule for the rest of the year. 2 red, 1 yellow, 1 green. I joked about this before. So the bad news for TL is that they have gone 1-1 in 5 consecutive weeks. The good news is this is the last week they can possibly go 1-1. Because next week is Super Week, and then after that is playoffs. But the team is definitely stuck. I feel like I say similar versions of the same thing about them every single week. They have experienced players. Their early game is good. Hey, 1-1's not that bad. And yeah, they have high expectations. But like the more you say that, the more mediocre they become and the less of a top flight team they are. With that being said, EG was 9-9 in spring. And look at them now. Totally different situation because they had younger players that needed to come together. But the conversation behind the scenes was, hey, EG is good. People should be scared of that team. The conversation behind the scenes still is, hey, TL is pretty damn good. They're still probably going to be pretty good in playoffs. Teams still fear playing against them, but they definitely fear them less than they would have after lock-in tournament because they haven't shown improvement kind of the entire year. So the expectation that they are somehow going to do it as soon as playoffs hit is getting less and less realistic the longer it goes on with them staying kind of at the same level. All right, next team, CLG. Number 5, they play C9 on Saturday and FlyQuest on Sunday. 3 red teams left. 1 yellow, 1 green. But I also have to say that they are the most aggressive team in the LCS. And last week, that worked great for them. Against Dignitas and against Golden Guardians, Contracts was just flipping everywhere. He took over some of those games. And this split especially, that aggression has just worked so much better than it did in spring. So that makes them, even though they have a very hard schedule, it makes them a threat to be able to beat any of these teams. Now, against the red teams, I'd still only give them like 40% chance, but you can hit that 40% multiple times in a row. It's not that unlikely from a probability standpoint. So there's still a chance they could make a big run and get way up there in the standings. It is more likely that they will struggle in the red games. I still think that the FlyQuest game is going to be the most interesting one, right? Because that's a team that feels more stable than COG, but COG definitely feels like the stronger team, mainly because we just watched FlyQuest lose twice fairly soundly, which will bring me to the sixth team here. FlyQuest, they play TL Saturday and COG Sunday. Really tough week overall, though, for the rest of the year. 2 red, 1 yellow, 2 green. So smack dab middle strength of schedule, basically. But they really got bopped last week, C9 and EG. Neither loss was completely unexpected. We were judging them as a top team last week, and they didn't get it done. Getting 1 win would have been the goal, I think. 2 losses is definitely disappointing. And the most apparent thing about their losses last week was that Takui and Jose Diodo did not perform. This team needs those 2 to perform to win. And against the C9 game, Blabber popped the hell off on Olaf. And I think Jose Diodo had one of his worst Lee Sin plays probably of his career when he ward jumped, flashed in, burned all his cooldowns on Inspired's Wukong. And then Wukong just killed him while still having 70% of his health. I have to imagine that he just didn't realize that Wukong had Divine Sunderer completed, because Divine Sunderer is just an absolutely insane power spike for Wukong. And maybe the Lee Sin wins that if Wukong doesn't have Sunderer. But dude, that was not even close. And after that moment, Inspired completely took over the map. And it's just a reminder that even though, like, Takui is an incredible player, he was, I believe, second team All-Pro mid in spring when FlyQuest was 9-9. Probably going to end up as something similar here in summer. But if he doesn't have a good game, I don't think FlyQuest wins. The first time they played TL, they did have a big lead. They didn't close it. It was one of their missed opportunities. And then against COG, as we just talked about, that game could really go either way. So a big week for FlyQuest to try and make a statement. And with the way the standings are stratified, they're probably locked in the top 6. But it would be nice to be able to move up and down that a little bit and maybe get side selected in one of their playoff series. All right, number 7, Golden Guardians. They play 100 Thieves on Saturday, Immortals on Sunday. 3 red teams, 2 green teams. So yeah, things aren't going well for Golden Guardians, guys. They made the trade deadline splash. They traded for River. They wanted to spice up their early game, maybe make them more capable of transferring leads into victories. But then they lost to COG's early game, and then they got chimed by TSM's by Bard by TSM, and TSM got one of their rare wins against them and looked pretty good doing it. So they haven't, like, at the time of recording this podcast, maybe this is completely relevant and you can skip to the next team. They did something really weird in Proving Grounds on Wednesday. They started a Blaze Olive against EG Prodigies. So, and then also their support wasn't there either. They brought in a new guy who didn't even have a GG tag, and he was just playing on their Proving Grounds team. So a Blaze Olive, so Lighter and Prismal, their previous academy mid laner and support, just were not there, which tells me they're at least scrimming with those guys on the LCS squad. And if they want to play Lighter, he counts as an import, which means they then wouldn't be able to play either River or Ole. So that's why I think Prismal was up there. So basically, I think there's a chance they make 2 more roster changes for next week, which would be Prismal in at support, Ole out, Lighter in at mid, a Blaze Olive out, I think it's a last-ditch effort to try and make a push for playoffs. They still haven't locked it. Remember, 8 teams make playoffs. 7 and 8 start in the losers bracket. Golden Guardians has lost a lot of games in a row. They do not look like they have signs of improvement, so they're just trying to change things. I think. Nothing's been announced. That's just the speculation based off of what I've seen in Proving Grounds. So we'll see. Things are not going well for them, though, unfortunately. Next team, TSM. They play EG Saturday, Dig Sunday. They have 3 red games, 1 yellow game, 1 green game. And TSM has been under enormous pressure all year long. We know they've changed their roster around several times. But I kind of feel like that game they had against Golden Guardians, when Chime picked Bard, they definitely played freer than I've seen them. Now, playing free can also lead you to making huge mistakes and getting stomped. But it also gives you the chance to make upsets happen. So again, speculation. It feels like kind of at this point of the season, TSM's like, all right, guys, we're not going to Worlds. Like, let's take that pressure off ourselves. Let's just try and do some flashy shit and win games. And if they can reach that mode, because they do have some pretty talented players on that team, they're not going to be a top team, but I think they have a chance to play like a good team on a day, which will make them dangerous for teams that are really stressing to get those last few wins before playoffs for playoff seeding. Next team, Immortals. They play Dignitas Saturday, Golden Guardians Sunday, one of the easier schedules. They have 1 red team, 2 yellow teams, and 2 green teams, with, of course, 2 of the green teams being this week. So even though they were 0-2, they actually had a great week 6. The game against EG, they pushed them really hard, and that 100 Thieves game was very close until they lost a team fight in just a really bad spot. And then 100 Thieves pushed and killed their Nexus, even though the gold was still really close. So they put up great showings against the 2 best teams in the league, but were 0-2. And there is a huge mental toll that comes with that type of loss. Like a guy like Revenge, he had such an incredible Yone game against EG, and it didn't matter. So for a team that has just taken lump after lump this year, the fear would be those 2 losses break them. But if they can keep their heads and honestly just play as well as they did last week, that level of play, I think, gets them wins against both Dignitas and Golden Guardians, which would move them into playoffs. So super important that they can keep their confidence up after 2 very demoralizing losses. Actually kind of interested to watch Immortals and see if they can pull it off. 10th place team, Dignitas. They have 2 red teams, 3 green teams. This week they play 2 of the green teams, Immortal Saturday, TSM Sunday. I have a thing in the article. This is definitely a little bit of a meme, but I'll explain it. I only learned about the meme like a couple weeks ago. If anyone knows the movie Morbius, I think it's got like Jared Leto. It's like one of the worst Marvel movies ever made, apparently. Very few people watched it. And then there's like this meme culture that came up out of it, where this group of people just started talking about how awesome Morbius was and how Morbius would be like, remember that time where Morbius said it's Morbin time and then he morbed all over them? And it caught on, and so much so that the studio actually re-released the movie because they thought there was a cult following for it. There was not. There was just a lot of memes. So it did nothing. They wasted a bunch of money. This can go 2 ways, because I was in the post-game thread for Dig versus COG. It wasn't the top comment. Most of it was COG Hope. But people were kind of hooning out. Like, they were saying he is the single greatest thing to happen to NA talent, and that their favorite moment was when he said it's hooning time and hooned all over them. Just something to track. It's tough out there for Dig. I support joking about it. Just don't make it mean. There's a chance this could be cool, right? Hoon was up in CS, even if his Ornn ultimates were not that good. I think I like the meme as long as it doesn't tilt Hoon, because these guys are in a tough position. I think I like the meme. Not sure. We have to see how it goes. Anyway, that's it for 10 Thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed listening. I'll keep doing this next week. Next week is Super Week. So there'll be 3 days of games. This coming week, obviously, is not Super Week. Saturday, Sunday, normal times. Next podcast is going to be Monday at 6 a.m. And I'll see you there. Thanks again, guys and girls.